While working as a middle school biology teacher during the 1960s, Steve Johnson's interest in photography and his love of nature brought him into repeated contact with the widespread damage that livestock grazing inflicts on western public lands. By the early 1970s, Johnson's increasing concern about environmental degradation led to his joining Defenders of Wildlife as their Southwest field representative, a position he held until 1989. In September 2003, I spoke with Johnson at his home in Tucson, Arizona, about the role of livestock grazing in the decline of the desert tortoise population.
The one species of wildlife that most opened my eyes to the failure of the Bureau of Land Management to do any management for the benefit of anything but ranchers was the desert tortoise. And as far as I know, this still continues, that there was an ephemeral grazing policy in the BLM. Ephemeral plants are those plants which come up and make the desert green, the flowers, not just flowers, but all the things that make the desert beautiful in those rare years that you really have a lot of rain that occurs at the right times. And BLM permits ranchers to apply for extra grazing when the conditions are right. And so they are able to flood the desert with more cattle when the desert has that unusual abundance, very fleeting abundance of plants. Well, that just ignores the entire survival mechanisms of a whole range of desert creatures. The desert tortoise is probably the best known because it's been the most studied. It's an animal that lives perhaps 100 years. Certainly it has a breeding period of at least 60 years, and it can have more than one clutch of eggs during a year if conditions are good. But for most years, conditions aren't good. They may have one clutch, but they may have no survivors. If you think about the tortoise for just a moment, population biology tells us generally that any species will reproduce up to the limit of its environment. The desert tortoise, in order for a stable population to be reached, which it always is with any species, in 60 years of breeding effort, or perhaps 80 years exceptionally, but at least 60 years, they only have to produce one young to survive them in 60 years of effort. A pair has to produce 2 tortoises. Just thinking about that for just a minute would tell anybody with half a brain that things are tough out there. That during those times of abundance, quote unquote, in the desert, those are the times when the tortoise and the chuckwalla and all the other creatures that need those temporary rare abundances, they need them because they have so many summers that they don't have anything, particularly when the cattle and sheep are here, as they have been for more than a century. So you have an animal like the tortoise who is underground about 95% of its life. It's the closest to a pet rock that you can think of. It needs almost nothing. It eats less in a year, about 17 to 23 pounds of plants in a year, an adult tortoise. That's less than a cow eats in a single day. And if you have an animal like this, dying of starvation, and you do we need anything else? Do we need anything else to tell us what we've done to the capacity of this desert to support life? An animal that, in terms of evolution, is a success. It's been here millions of years, unchanged. And it's having severe problems across its range.